It doesn't seem like I have video today. I'm not sure if any of you can see me as we discuss today Light the Way and from Light the Way Counseling Center. My name is Gerard DiMatteo, and we're talking about validation and the importance of validation uh, in communicating with each other, especially in marriages and in any type of couples relationship. Um, I have found that this is a missing piece uh, often with couples as they are trying to get through some kind of conflict issue or resolution. And when couples comprehend this very important aspect in communication. It really does help their ability to move forward in the relationship. I think many of us know that in our relationships, I've been married 45 years and 4 children. Communication is a huge part of it. And it's not just the types of words we say, but being able to listen from an emotional perspective of what our partners are communicating to us. Often, as is the case, we move into the blame game, right? And we accuse or criticize our partners with regard to the issue or the conflict or the problem, complaint that we might have. But one of the standard ideas in communicating well is the concept of really sharing I statements, statements of where you're coming from and what you're feeling, not blaming, no you statements. You talk about your feelings, and you want to be specific to the situation that you're speaking about. You're not throwing in the kitchen sink, but it's regarding a specific issue that is giving you difficulty or struggling. Once you're able to do that, and you want to do it in a way where you're expressing a positive need, a need whereby you are able to say, this is what I need in this. This is the thing that will enable me to um, get past and resolve this conflict. Sometimes it could be something simple, but often, in my wife and our relationship, we would get in conflict about the budget. I I have what they used to call champagne taste with a beer pocketbook. And I remember very vividly a conflict where we had where I wanted to buy this thing for the house, which was way over our budget. And so I talked to her about my feelings about it. And it wasn't her problem, really. She was much better at spending than me. But what was revealed is my frustration with not being able to have the ability financially to make this expenditure. My frustration with my job, my frustration with the amount of money that I make. And so, as we talked this through, she began to see what my feelings were, and we were able to actually come to a conclusion that was a win-win for both of us. But I shared from my perspective and what I was feeling, and she became a very willing listener. And that's key in this because so often what happens is couples are not listening to each other, they're talking past each other, and they're not able to really clearly hear what the other person is saying. And so, if a couple can get into that position where they are a team, that they're listening to the emotions of the other person, you're postponing your own agenda. You hear and repeat the context and the content of what the other speaker is saying. Like specifically, my wife would say, Gerard, what I'm hearing is you really just frustrated that you can't buy this thing because you realize that we don't make the amount of money that we need to make. And you're just very frustrated. You're not blaming me. And she got it. I was able to affirm that. And she's understanding my feelings of disappointment. That's just something about buying something for the house. But in her stating it back to me, and here's where we get to the main word of what we're talking about today. The main word is to validate. She was able to tell me uh, that it made sense to her, that she understood why I would feel that way. And the reason why she knows I would feel that way is because I do have certain tendencies to want to get things that are excellent, but have to say no to that impulse time and time and time again. And we talk it through. She asks me questions. We figure out a way. Well, let's save so that we can move to buy this thing. She validated my feelings. I felt she understood exactly what I was thinking and feeling. That's validation. She could have come at it, and we could have come at it in a very more combative way. I could have said that you're much too tight with the money of our household. She could have felt blamed by me and then begin to criticize me about how I'm much freer in the way I want to spend. But instead, we were able to look at it as a team and say, I can say what I was feeling. She could hear. She did not feel criticized, or if she did feel criticized, she started to clarify that. I was able to assure her, and then she was able to hear and feel and then validate. Doesn't necessarily mean agree. That's what's funny about validation is that sometimes we think, well, if I validate my spouse and what they're feeling and what they're communicating or the complaint they have, that I am fully agreeing. To be quite honest, she didn't really agree that we needed that expenditure, but she understood me and understood where I'm coming from. And I understood her, how that would not be a big deal for her to purchase, where it was a big deal for me. She was able to put aside those kinds of things that she maybe disagreed with or thought that the expenditure was, outside her comfort zone, and validate my point of view. So validation does not mean agree. It just means that you are really in the shoes and in the mind and the emotional space of the other person, and you're understanding that emotional space. If you're looking at this from a biblical perspective, it's very, very clear when Jesus talked about really trying to understand what the other person is feeling and thinking, and then us acting upon that. It's really virtually the same principle. And then once that's understood, you can then move to a place where, okay, how are we going to compromise and solve this problem? And so we both had to sacrifice in a certain way. Now, this is a minor issue. This is a budget issue, although for some couples, these are really huge issues. There are other problems that are a lot more difficult than this. But this one specifically, we were able to then say, okay, let's budget it. Gerard, you're going to have to wait for this expenditure. Okay. But uh, I am going to make sure, and we made sure that we were able to save enough to make it, to do it. My wife compromise was, I don't really think we need this, but I understand where you're coming from. So I am going to, sacrifice my ability to be much more careful with our funds, and we'll make it. I had to wait. She was willing to move past what she thought was appropriate, and we were able to make the expenditure and go ahead and do it. That is problem solving. That's being able to, for me to compromise and for her to compromise and move to a place where it's a win win for both. That's what happens if communication with that key ingredient of validation is part and parcel of what a couple in communicating is able to do. Now, there are certain things that are stumbling blocks, and I'll basically end with three things. The first one that becomes a stumbling block to this is that when you're talking about something that you're maybe passionate about, you get into this zone called flooding. And by the way, I want to urge you to know, I want you to know that this, what we're talking about today, comes from John Gottman's work and research on couples. And if you Google John Gottman, a lot of this will come up. And he talks specifically about the importance of validation. It's really believing that you can understand where the other person is coming from. But one of the things that they found in their research was that a couple, when you're starting to get upset or passionate about the situation that you're talking about, they found that if your heart rate starts to go above 90 beats per minute, you begin to lose, or I should say, the blood flow to the brain starts to move more toward the body. Everything begins to kick in, and at those points, you can move to the fight or flight or freeze zone. And so in cases like that, you have to really call a timeout. My wife and I often, because we both get passionate about certain things, are usually able to work through our flooding during the conversation. We both realize, okay, we're getting over the top here, and we got to do some self calming. Some couples do not have any um, ability or self control to stop the train, and that's a very important thing. You want to be able to stop the train. And what Gottman basically says, unless the research has changed in recent years, is that you need at least 20 minutes to distract yourself and not think about how you're going to win the argument. Distract yourself from the situation and then commit to come back to it. So flooding is one of those stumbling blocks that gets in the way of real validating each other and moving to solving a conflict. A second thing that is a very big impediment, and this will take much more work with therapy, with a good counselor, and that is negative sentiment override. Negative sentiment override is this idea, and this again comes from their research, whereby you start to look at the relationship with your spouse or partner from a really a more negative standpoint. That's where it's coming from. I have counseled couples sometimes where the negative sentiment override is so thick that they can't remember any good things when they got married about their relationship. Now we know 98% of couples who get married for some good reasons, or at least reasons that they were enjoying at that point in time. When negative sentiment override gets that dark, sometimes they can't even remember or do not want to remember it. So if depending on how thick or how dark the negative sentiment override is, and Gottman discusses um, very clearly the ratios of how many thoughts are negative and how many are positive, and what is tipping the scale into the negative. But basically, it's this idea where you're driving home and going home and thinking about what home life is going to be like, and you're not feeling good about it. You're feeling negative about it. If that's a really strong aspect of your relationship, then that needs to be addressed because validation is going to be very, very difficult because ultimately you're not trusting your partner to be able to hear you. And trust is one of the essential pieces that undergirds all of this, that you believe that your partner has your back, that they are for you, not perfectly, but basically you are a team and that you want to work together. So those two things, flooding becomes a stumbling block, and you have to work on just setting a very strict agreement between each other that when you start to get flooded, you want to stop the discussion. It's moving into an argument, and you're not going to be able to get to that place of conflict resolution. And certainly, you're not going to often be able to validate the other person's point of view. The second one is negative sentiment override. And in order to work through negative sentiment override, there's a whole host of things that couples can begin to do where they can build trust, but that will be kind of tailored to what the issues of that relationship is. Okay. So, let me basically review before we come to an end. And if there are any people here who may have some questions about this, feel free, but we can talk about that. That a major part of listening is that you want to put aside your agenda and really allow the person to talk about their complaint. The person who is giving their complaint or issue, you want to talk about it in mainly feeling format. This is how I feel when this happens. This is what goes on in me when this happens. And so it takes it out of the blame uh, uh, arena. And then you want to almost be able to state your complaint in a positive need. I need this. I feel this about the situation. And the positive need for me is the thing that we were going to buy for the house was I want to buy something that's going to endure for a long time and not be just, let's say, a cheap expenditure that's going to wear out in 4 years. Okay. And so that's something that I desire and that I need. And then the person who's listening, you want to be able to validate. And validate basically is that you understand and enable the other person who's waging the complaint to really see that you understand that it makes sense to you and that you can really state what they're thinking and feeling regarding the issue. Validation. It's often missed, or maybe it's done. It's actually done by successful couples without even knowing they're doing it. But that is a key piece to a successful uh, relationship. Any questions today, or any other thoughts that you'd like to add to this live stream? We're glad you're with us. If you have any counseling needs, please go to Like the Way. There's a bunch of really great counselors who can really help in situations when we're going through things that are stressful in our marriages, in our relationships, and in life in general. Cindy asks a great question. Can we apply this to friendships or the workplace? As a matter of fact, the answer to that is yes. Where John Gottman got this idea about validation was from a man who worked in the social sciences. His last name was Rappaport. I don't have all his full credentials, but basically, Rappaport was this guy who researched and wanted to apply validation. Ready for this? validation for countries, governments, to be able to understand where each person, each side is coming from and how they can work out their differences. So it was originally designed or principally designed for governments to be able to work out their issues. We can see how well governments do in this, don't we? I'm being sarcastic, but so the point is, yes, this can not only apply to governments, this can apply to corporations, this can apply to friendships, this can apply obviously in marriages, and it can be applied in the workplace as well. Between managers and hierarchy in any kind of corporation, absolutely. Now that takes a lot of trust when it goes outside the one-on-one. Now you're starting to build an idea and a culture that requires trust. But yes, absolutely. And yeah, governments do not often apply this. Why? Because we don't trust the other governments. Any other questions or thoughts here? Gino, good to see you today. Thanks for coming on. All right. If not, God bless you all. I'm going to end the stream and have a wonderful rest of the day.